Yeah, that's the second. So you were saying that's the second most common recorded one is the disc?
That's what it says in Immaculate Constellation.
Hey,
Orb
we were
is
just,
number
sorry,
one.
go ahead.
Orb is number one.
Orb is number one. Yeah, it seems like orbs get a lot of play
Yep.
in this space. And obviously people like Chris Bledsoe, he's videotaping these things regularly. And orbs of light, I know you have your own experience with that. We're going to get into that for a second. For everybody listening, we were just chatting away about the new video footage that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp just released. The military footage showing the disc emerging from the clouds and changing directions. It's pretty wild video. But today we've got Erik here. Erik, I've been looking forward to this podcast for a minute now. You and I have had a couple conversations, and you have a very interesting story, and you're also an independent researcher. And I wanted to have you on, but first, maybe you could just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in these topics.
Sure. And thanks for having me. Happy to be here. We've been chatting before this, and the name of your podcast is great because you're one of the most curious people I've met. And I love curious people, and I like talking about interesting things. I'm known for a couple things. I'm an author. So I write obscure history books about where I'm originally from, upstate New York. I'm an adventurer, so I've completed a lot of long distance mountain biking and hiking trips. I've been working in the woods for quite a while. But then when I turned 40, I found myself working as a backcountry ranger and sleeping in a leaky tent. And I said, oh man, I'm going to have to get a real job. So I'm also known as a therapist at the tender age of 40, went back, got my master's because therapists had helped me out in the past. And I thought it'd be nice to return the favor. I got interested in UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call it. And I actually forgot I did this. When I was getting my undergrad, it was 1999. I'm dating myself. It was 1999, and Stanton Friedman came and spoke at my university. I totally forgot about this till about a year ago. And I went and saw his presentation. He spoke for about 90 minutes, and he's got photos, and obviously a really smart guy. And I talked to him after, and I was like, okay, yeah, this doesn't seem like a guy who's easily fooled. There must be something to this. And then it just went off my radar. I really wasn't into the whole matter. I was doing other things that I was interested in until I believe it was summer of 2019 when Joe Rogan hosted Bob Lazar. I've seen that interview probably 5 times now. Out of Joe Rogan's 2,500 full-length episodes, it's number one. It's got about 66 million views right now, and more than a lot of other really popular guests. So I started looking into Bob Lazar's claims. Bob Lazar is an outlier for me. So I like facts, evidence, reasoning, logic. I don't think he's presented extremely good evidence, but come on. It's too good not to believe. I just have to believe it because it's my favorite story. Started doing my own research beginning about 2000. So I've been in this field for about 5 years now. And here I am talking to you tonight.
Fascinating. And you have had your own personal experience as well, some sort of paranormal experience. Do you want to tell people about that experience a little bit?
Yeah, no problem at all. So we have to go back to August 2022. So I live in Colorado Springs, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm a very active backpacker. I had a couple days off from work as a therapist, and I said, I'll just go up into the mountains. I usually go by myself. I pack really light, and I like to cover a lot of miles in a day. I just travel fast and light and just go up mountains, and if it's a loop hike, even better, and that's what I planned. Got to the trailhead, went out on day 1, and climbed a couple mountains, and then went to camp at night. The campsite setup is a little important to the story, so you can imagine what happened at night. It's gonna sprinkle. So I'm at the highest elevation where trees grow, okay, which is almost 12,000 feet. I have a little tarp. It's only 6 foot by 8 foot tarp, and I have a sleeping bag and a foam pad. And so I string up the tarp like a low A-frame and crawl inside so I can lay on my belly and look out and watch it rain while I stay dry. At this point, it's just another trip. There's nothing really special about it. I didn't think there's anything special about me. And I
You're by
fall
yourself.
totally by myself and I fall asleep. And it's out in the boonies. There's no one around for miles and miles, and no infrastructure really for miles and miles. So, what I remember initially is a little segmented and confused, but during the past year or two, I've figured out what happened, and I'll give you this updated version so it's not as confused. It was sometime around 1, 1:30, and I'm laying prone. So I'm laying on my stomach. I've got a stack of clothes here for my head, and I set up everything the same every time. So next to me, rain jacket, camera, food, shoes, trekking poles. It's like I could just find stuff in the night. And I am awoken by this orange thick light. And that's the only way to describe it. You know, seeing this story, it's like I don't quite have the words for what I experienced. It's a light if it was shining through fog, but there was no fog.
Mm.
It's like it had a density to it. And I sit up and look around, and the campsite is bathed in this soft orange light. And I just go, and fall back asleep. All right, that's weird because that has never happened. I'm in the middle of nowhere, and you think I would say something along the lines of, what the hell is that? And wake up. No, I was just completely disinterested, had no interest in staying awake and looking at it. And I immediately doze off. And then I'm thinking 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes later, I'm now laying on my back. And I get up, I wake up, and it's not like I wake up. Now, when you wake up in the woods, I'm already tired. So you rub your eyes and fuddle around. But this was, and by this point, I had slept over 1,000 nights in the woods. It was this way I woke up that I never have before and never have since. Waking up with a purpose. And I woke up knowing that I needed to look at something in the sky over there.
So what time are we talking about now?
This will be somewhere around 1:30.
All right. So it's middle of the night.
1:30. Yeah. And these two events happened within, I don't know, a minute or two of each other. So
Mhm.
it's the dead of night. And in one fluid motion, I wake up and prop myself up on my elbow. It's just this incredibly smooth motion with a distinct purpose. And I look over, and there is a big orange orb.
How
I
far
believe
away?
it's far away. It's exactly 2 miles away. So what I'm looking at is a 14,000 foot peak, a high ridge, and it's hovering over it, just hanging out. This is the same orb that was precisely described the same exact way by Chris Bledsoe. I think it's the same one that visited him. Like, it's identical. Looks like lava, fire, orange marmalade shifting around, not quite solid. And I look at it, and then, if things weren't weird enough, my consciousness leaves my body. And I'm suddenly a quarter mile from it, looking at it. I can see it as clear as day, and it's very close. That
Wow.
lasts maybe 1 second. I fall back asleep. And it's not like I left. I almost said, oh, I came back and went to sleep. It wasn't like that. It's just this, there is no time, there is no space, there is no distance. It's just, I was closer somehow. I fall asleep, and I slept. It was the best night's sleep I've ever gotten. Usually I toss and turn. You can imagine my campsite. It's 1 star. It's not very comfortable. I wake up the next morning, zero recollection. Nothing. Nothing.
So you don't remember this happening. So when did you start to piece this back together?
I start packing up my campsite. Now it's a beautiful sunny day. It had rained the night before. And I have to start making my way up a 13,000 foot peak. And once I break through the trees, there are no trees. from 12 to as high as you want to go in here in Colorado. It's just too high for the trees to grow. And I get this gorgeous view all around. And I look over at those two peaks and the ridge line. And I remember, I go, something was in my campsite.
Mm.
But why would I think of the campsite looking over there? And I was certain it was a bunny or an elk. That's it.
Mm.
Nothing weird, nothing weird. By the time I get to the top of the mountain about 2 hours later, I'm looking over at that ridge again, and now I'm getting these fragmented memories, a flash here, a flash there, a little orange light here, some darkness, some trees, and I just can't, it's all scrambled. As I go throughout the day, I'm just incredibly apathetic, like trying to remember. It just doesn't interest me at all. I spend another night out on another peak. This one's 12,000. And I did something different that I had never done before. I carry a 6-foot by 4-foot blaze orange signal panel, like a pilot would use if he crashed, because I hike by myself, remote areas, no service. And so if I need to be rescued, they could find me. You just spread it out on the ground if someone's looking for you. I took it out of my pack and I spread it on the ground before I went to bed because I thought I was going to disappear. I didn't know why. I don't know why at the time I did that. So now I go home, drive home. So it was 2 nights, 3 days. I get home, and the second I enter this house, this is the only way to describe it. It's like somebody cut the top of my head off and poured in 5-gallon bucket of memory. Recall knew no bounds, none. It was all incredibly crystal clear. The light,
Vivid.
the grit, everything. And then I started having problems because I remembered what happened. It totally blew my mind. And I acquired what we call in my field acute stress disorder. Acute stress disorder is, in layperson terms, a short-term version of post-traumatic stress disorder, where reminders are very disturbing. And the reminders could be quite vague. If I saw something round, that bothered me. If I saw something red, it bothered me. If I looked at mountains, photos of mountains in that area, it bothered me. I wanted nothing to do with that trip. I didn't sleep for 4 days, and I was terrified of the dark. I slept with every light on in this house. I somehow managed to go to work, and the owner of the practice I worked for at the time eventually took me aside and was like, "What the hell is going on?" I looked terrible.
Right.
And then everything after that 4 days, it just, I don't know. I just became very at peace with it, but I wasn't trying. It was this gauntlet needed to be run. Now, when I look on it, I find it, I think I'm very grateful, and I think I'm very fortunate. I don't want to say it found me or something like that. I think that's a little conceited. I think it was intentional. The damn thing could have found me my whole life. I'm out in the woods by myself all the time. So in hindsight, it was a very positive experience that has changed me in many ways.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you have this sort of total recall when you step back into your home and you're remembering more detail about it. You can see the thing. You have this out of body experience that you recall completely. Do you have anything else part of your memory that's disturbing, or is there anything else about it that's like that you recall once you get back in the house that was in more detail? Is there more that happened? Did you see a being or?
No, there's only one other thing that I remembered when I got back, and I have to laugh because the story's crazy.
Like, where do you put this?
Pardon?
It's like, where do you put something like this? I've
Yeah,
heard
there's
stories along these lines before, and my first thought is like, if this has happened to me, it's like, where do you even put this? How do you even tell somebody about this? Because there's so few people that probably have had a similar experience. But tell us what else happened.
yeah, and there is no comparison. I remembered that I received a message. So MUFON had about 500 really good cases that year that they couldn't solve in the state of Colorado. and only 2 had an interaction with what they saw. I just happened to be one of them. When I zoomed in on this orb over that ridge line, got a really good look at it, and again, the language is so evasive, it's like impossible to pin down. Not heard, and it's not a message, like you just know.
A knowing.
We are here. Goodbye. We are here. Goodbye. Crystal clear. But what's interesting is I didn't take it that way. I thought it was meant to say, yes, we're real. We'll see you again. Yes, we're real. We'll see you again. I thought the first statement was related to the research I've been doing. The second statement, I think I'll find out eventually. That was the big piece of it that's really important that I had no recollection of at all until I got home.
Fascinating. So this sort of set you on your journey of more research into this topic we call the UFO UAP topic. And you've been doing some significant work, and I believe you're writing a book now on a UFO flap that happened in the year 1977. Is that true?
Correct. And I hate to admit it, I had not heard of this. And actually, few people I know in this community are aware of it. I think it's the greatest, I don't think it is the greatest UAP event in U.S. history.
And this took place during the year 1977. So do you want to tell people about how many sightings are reported during this time period, where they're happening, different types of shapes of craft that are being reported?
Yes, no problem. Very briefly, how I got into this is a friend asked me, hey, did I ever tell you my UFO story? Which is one of my favorite questions. And I said, no. It turns out he's one of the best witnesses of over 1,200 people. He might be the best witness, period. And it's just funny that he is the best witness and we happen to meet. So he said, yeah, he ended his story with, yeah, California, 1977, look into it. And so I did. Okay. So during the past month, I've been doing quite a bit of research on what happened in California in 1977. So I'm looking at the website in front of me because I don't have all of this memorized.
Mhm.
Basically, the book will be called UFO 1977. I'm only covering that year. Sightings began on the very first day of that year. There were 2 of them, and it lasted all the way until the day after Christmas Day, so December 26th. I have collected maybe a third of the data at this point, okay? But I'll give you some overall numbers here, not going into too much detail. So in 1977 in California, and I'm only counting reputable sightings, okay? Stuff that was investigated and was not solved, okay? It just can't be somebody saying something. There's got to be a story behind it. The craft seen in that one year, 242. However, the number's a little deceiving because I don't know if people are saying the same craft or a different one. So if you have an orb zoom across Ventura, Orange, and Riverside County, and 3 people see it, I counted it as 3 crafts because I don't know if it's a different one. Okay, so the
Right.
maximum possible total would be 242. And the top 2 are orbs. Orbs were 57% of the sightings, and discs were 22%. Okay. And then you have a mix of triangles, cylinders, diamonds, pyramids, boomerangs, and rectangles. So far, I've counted 1,208 adult witnesses and 70 children who were witnesses. And there are 115 different sighting events. So 115 unique events. Now, one of the most fascinating and just enthralling things about this is I've never heard of so many cases where the craft was so close to people. So out of the 242 craft, and again, we don't know if there are repeats, 40 of the incidents, okay, so 40 people, or I should say 40 individual occurrences, the craft was less than 1,000 feet.
Oh,
Okay, a quarter
wow.
mile is 1,200.
That's close.
Oh, it gets better.
Yeah.
38 less than 500 feet.
Wow.
14 less than 100 feet. And 11 less than 50 feet. So a
Yeah.
basketball hoop is 10 feet off the ground. Okay. So it's
Yeah. So you can
10
throw a baseball at this thing.
And it's funny you mentioned that because my friend who told me the original story, that's exactly what he said. He said, dude, it was so close I could have hit it with a baseball, and he was 10 years old at the time. Some are as close as 15 feet.
Wow.
It's just incredible. Okay. The craft had a lot of different flight behavior, hovered.
Can I ask you a
Yeah, go
question?
ahead.
Can we go back to the
Yeah.
distance real quick?
Yeah.
So when you start to get that close, we have accounts of people having radiation burns and different biological effects when you start getting close to these accounts. Do any of your accounts touch on that? Any biological effects?
It was extremely rare, extremely rare. So my friend, his mom and his sister were within 30 feet of it, but they're not sure how long, maybe a couple minutes. They're
Mhm.
totally fine. Nothing happened. I did find 2 cases where people broke out in a rash, but it was
Mhm.
not really definitive of what exactly it was. And others had almost like a flu-like symptom, but it was extremely rare. So a lot of these sightings, 30 feet, 45 feet, 65 feet, there are no physical injuries, ailments, anything like that.
Okay.
That's
Just
also
curious.
pretty interesting. Yeah, and feel free to chime in whenever you want with additional questions. No problem. The flight behavior, they hovered, cruised, and of course, rapidly accelerated. Some speeds were 12,000 miles an hour, instantaneous, just boom. Discs, a lot of discs going vertically up and down. Some craft joined together, some craft separated, and a bunch just disappeared. They had various lights, multicolored lights on the bottom of a rotating circle on the bottom of a disc. That was by far the most common reporting. Some lit up the ground in a flood-like pattern. Others lit up vehicles that people were in. A bunch of aircraft were visited. 9 different sheriff's departments were involved. 3
Jeez.
police departments, 2 Air Force bases, and the FAA and a naval station. Yeah, and then there's a bunch more information here, and I don't want to overdo it, but there's one thing that I'm looking into, and it's going to be the center of the book, is this question: why? So we know that UAPs visit certain places. All right. So nowadays it's just nuclear assets. That's where they really like to go, in infrastructure and training facilities. We all know that. These visited a municipal water facility, a reservoir, and a water tower. Okay, so that had to do with the public water supply.
Is this
One was
all
a
in the United
aeros
States?
Pardon?
Is this all in the United States or is this
Th
global?
We're still in California.
We're still in California.
Yeah, this is all in California.
Wow.
Yeah, for the 1 year. Yeah, we haven't left
Okay.
the state.
All right. Okay. So we
Yeah,
haven't left the state. So for 1 year, 1977, we had massive UFO sightings and reports all in the state of California.
m massive, all in one city. I have not left the borders yet tonight. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. Okay.
Very quickly, they also visit aerospace development facility, a power plant, an ICBM launch site where they launched a missile, a hospital, 2 military bases, and this is where it gets super interesting, 5 elementary schools. 5 elementary schools. And I don't know why, okay? Almost 100 children were visited in 1977. This is only the reported stuff. God knows how many kids were visited otherwise. The children are the ones who have the closest distances,
And that's,
always.
and of course, I'm sure you're well aware of the Westall incident
Yes.
and the Rua, Zimbabwe incident.
Yeah,
So these school visitations is not an uncommon theme. It seems to be a sort of a common trope within some of the more credible cases.
correct. So in 1977, we had the 5 or 6 elementary schools in California, but the identical craft, the same exact craft, visited schools in Wales, Australia, and England. Okay. And why I say it's the same thing, it's the one that visited my friend's house. It is described as a disc, 50 feet in diameter, a superstructure on top with windows, and dudes inside. And the dudes inside, it's always three, and they're always wearing tight silver flight suits. So we have people tens of thousands of miles apart describing the same exact thing across the year 1977. I think it's the same craft cruising around.
Wow. So again, like where do you put this? You have multiple accounts of people seeing the same thing in different parts of the world, all around the same year. So if you were to speculate, it's impossible to understand what could this possibly be, but if you were to speculate, what do you think one of the purposes is? Just saying hello? Just mind expansion? Hey, you're not alone?
I like the mind expansion theory. I think some of the closest encounters that go to children, why they occur with children, is you can't teach a dog an old dog new tricks, right? So I don't think if those three dudes, for example, if those three dudes want to influence how we operate down here, you're not going to pick somebody who's dead in 15 years, right? You're going to pick somebody who's impressionable and young and has their whole life ahead of them. But then again, like my friend, some other accounts I'm reading from children, they're not really saying they received a clear message. Some of them are saying that they're different, but they don't know how. But they can't articulate, they don't even know why the interaction happened. All they know is they look at the world a little differently.
Yeah, as you would. Even if you're like 10 to 12 years old, you've had enough time to acclimatize to daily routines and you're starting to formulate your worldview. And if you see something like that's going to absolutely shatter the way you think about your day-to-day routine. You're going to start to think that something's off. You know, here is this fantastical experience that I've just had. Where do you put that? That's going to change the way you think about your day-to-day life, and you're going to see things differently than someone that hasn't had that experience at that age. Yeah, I could imagine that. If something dramatic happened to me at a young age, I'd be like, "Whoa, I'm different now."
And what I'd like to do is find these kids. One school had 4 school children. The other school had 15. The schools are still there. I plan on contacting them,
Hmm.
which is going to be funny because they're either going to say something like, I remember that, or they're just going to hang up on me because they think
Right.
I'm like messing with them. I would love to meet some of those children, like they've done at aerial school, talking to them
Yeah.
as adults and see if they think they're different in any way. What's really cool, just like the aerial school thing, these kids drew what they saw. And I'm presuming they still have the drawings, which I would love to see.
Yeah, you can see some of the drawings and some of the documentative work that Dr. John Mack did when he went there. I know he went there shortly after that event while everything was still fresh in their mind. And we're talking about over 60 some kids, all describing basically the same thing, drawing very similar things. And I'm sorry, but you're not teaching 60 some kids how to lie. And then you've got teachers backing it up. And so, yeah, it starts to get quite compelling when you have a case like that and these other cases. So, yeah, I would be very interested to see what you uncover with that. I would be fascinated to hear if some of those kids are still around there now that they're adults, if any of the
Yeah,
teachers are living around the
they're all about
area.
60. They're about 60 right now.
Have you tracked any of them down yet?
I have, and I have my friend who's the main witness. I wanted to wait until the website was up, so I actually had something to show that I'm serious about this. I'll probably reach out to the schools this summer. I have the name of all the schools, and they're all standing still.
No. That's fascinating. I can't wait to dig into that work that you're doing. It sounds utterly amazing. And it is a big piece of this story is these school visitations. We've talked about a couple of them here in the last 10 minutes or so, but it's a reoccurring trope. I want to talk a little bit about your work that you're doing now with therapy because you have weaved this into your day-to-day work. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and your work with experiencers and how did you go about entertaining this?
Sure. Sure. So this was not intentional. It happened in kind of a funny way. So I used to work at a private practice. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Colorado. I was working at a private practice and I had a bookshelf full of books, and there's probably 20 books on UAPs. And eventually, clients started looking around the office and saw all those books. And they go, "Are you into UFOs?" And I was like, "We're not really here to talk about that." So I was like, "Yeah, it's something I look into." And then I got that favorite question again. "Did I ever tell you the time I saw a UFO?" I go, "No, you didn't." "Do you want to tell me?" "Yeah, yeah. Dude, I haven't told anybody," because they don't want to be ridiculed. Well, I heard, and it was a lot of clients. I had about 12 who just saw the books and said, "I got to tell you this because I haven't told anybody." And I was like, "Okay." And they told me maybe 5, 10, 20 minutes. And then we just got back to work with what we were working on. We got back to normal therapy, and they're glad that they could share it with me. And I got to thinking, I was like, all of them said that they haven't told anybody because they don't want to be ridiculed. And I said, I wonder if this is a niche out there where if you want to talk to me about your UAP experience, you can. Okay. Now, I don't want to get bogged down in details too much, but as a therapist, this is extremely controversial. Okay. Chances are very good if you have a strange experience and want to talk to a therapist, they're not going to know anything about UAPs. And I'm not beating them up because of the simple fact we can't all be interested in everything. Okay. So my specialty is couples, veterans, trauma. And if you want to tell me a UAP story, that's fine. Other people, LGBTQ, certain populations, certain eras, certain ages, kids, whatever. Okay. So we can't be interested in everything. So people can talk to me, but I actually don't work with them as a therapist. I talk to them like I'm talking to you. Okay. There's no diagnosis, no billing, nothing like that. I don't even do an intake. Okay. It's just somebody talking to a guy who happens to have a master's and knows a lot about UAPs. That's it. And what we would call this, we wouldn't even call it therapy. It's a peer support model. It's somebody with shared experience talking to somebody. It's exactly like we're talking today. People have found this really helpful. And even if I met one person, it's totally worth it because, again, they cannot tell anyone. Okay. It's going to make people feel uncomfortable. Immediately, people are going to say, could it have been? They might awkwardly joke about it. They're going to do everything you really shouldn't do when someone's trying to share something very important with you. In life in general, it's really difficult to find a good listener. So when people meet me, they tend to be grateful, and I'm really thankful to be able to help them.
That sounds like an amazing work that you're doing there. I recently interviewed Barbara Lamb, who's been doing therapy work with contactees for decades now. And same thing. I think she's just quite open to this, and she has an understanding that there's a market there for people that have had experiences and that want to talk about this. But like you said, it's been stigmatized, it's been ridiculed, and they don't want to talk about it with a lot of people. And so some of them seek professionals to say, "Hey, look, this happened. I don't know where to put this. It's troubling to me. I need to talk about it." And this enter people like yourself, enter people like Barbara Lamb, enter people like Dr. John Mack, who were taking the time to really give this a hard look and say, "Hey, there's something going on here." Not every single person that tells this story has a history of mental illness. There's a real phenomenon going on here, and it needs to be looked at because it's interacting with human beings. And it's, in some cases, causing trauma. And these people, like anybody else, have a right to get help, and they should be able to talk about it. Which kind of leads me into another thing I want to chat with you about. And I don't know if you have opinions on this, but what is do you, all right, this is hard because this is a massive topic, but what do you think the reason is for the disinformation or the media's non-compliance in at least talking about this in an educated, scientific way? What is the reason for that, do you think?
That's a really good question. And I think I've thought about this so much. And I think there are a couple, I think there are about 4 or 5 reasons. Okay. We'll start with the simplest one. And it's a little different response than what you're actually asking, but you'll see a lot of people not interested at all, which totally blows my mind because
Right.
this is like extremely important and obviously real. I think it goes back to people can't be interested in everything. Okay. So when I tried to, yeah, I'll admit it, I tried to have a friend become interested in this. And she said, "Look, Erik, my husband just got home from work. I have 2 fussy kids with a lot of allergies, and I'm trying to cook dinner." I get it. I get it. Okay. So we can't all be interested in everything, and we have just our day to day lives. When it comes to what a lot of people call the UAP or UFO giggle, where it gets like super awkward and it's, oh, little green men, like this whole shtick, I think that's from 85 years of propaganda of telling people they're crazy and telling people it was swamp gas and telling people nothing to see here. And if your neighbor says he saw something, he's probably crazy. That has been really effective and it survives today. The media is just, I have very little, probably like your average American, I have very little respect for the media. If it
Mainstream
leads,
media,
yeah, mainstream media. Yes. Thank
mainstream
you. Yes.
legacy media, which
Yeah.
seems to be struggling at the moment.
They are. I don't think they know how to navigate this. I think most of them are beyond the little green men like UAP giggle shtick, but I think they're having a lot of trouble navigating this in a serious manner. But some outlets like News Nation, they're doing a great job, and they've been doing a great job for years, and a lot of other publications out there as well. When it comes to government secrecy, I do not subscribe to the gloom and doom theories. Okay. So, oh, they're here to stop a nuclear holocaust. If we interact with them, we disrupt a timeline because they're from the future. They harvest our souls. I don't believe any of that because I have not seen any evidence, zero, to go with that. What I think it comes down to is human nature. I think this is about control, like the people who have these craft, and power and benefit. I think that's it. Greed, power, and benefit, because sometimes the simplest story is the true one.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's money, power, geopolitical power.
Mm.
I've said this before on this podcast, or I've asked Steve Bassett this question. Is one of the reasons we get to see this sort of political theater taking place with the whole disclosure movement, is it because they're trying is there a power struggle going on with the technology that's clearly been at least gleaned on a little bit? They've gotten some things from this stuff, right? They've definitely have derivative technologies. How far they've come with it is up for debate, but I think it's pretty obvious at this point that you can tell that there's probably some derivative technologies that have been made from UAP, UFO, and there's a power struggle going on right now. And probably because leadership has begun to die off over the last 80 years, and you have new leadership coming in with new ideas. And so, the new leadership might be saying things like, "Hey, you can't, this is an old way of doing this. This is illegal. You cannot do this." And then you have the other side of it where people think this is like the American people have a right to know. It's a philosophical and existential question that everyone has a right to know, that we're not alone. And yeah, I think that this is about money, power, and geopolitical control, which I think is in flux right now. And that's the reason why we all get to see disclosure being playing out in this theater that we're happening. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's about money and power.
Yeah.
And the other stuff I think might be distractions. Oh, they're in control and they're controlling this. Yeah, you could say that if the UFO phenomenon is real, and I think it is, and if there are visitors here hiding out somewhere on the planet, they could end it tomorrow. But why would they? but why, if they're sentient beings and they've got things to do, they probably don't care about disclosure. They're like, we're
Mhm.
here to harvest this or get this resource here, or keep an eye on the planet and make sure, like, they don't care about disclosure of this. They've got their own things going on. So I don't know if I buy the whole they're in control of disclosure narrative. Do you want to talk a little bit about where you think, I don't know if you've researched this. In your research, have you come across where you think the technology, the human technology has actually gotten to? Have you gone down that road yet?
The idea that these are modern human tech.
Or that at least they've gleaned derivative technologies off of this and that some of the
Mhm.
things people see are in fact human tech. Have you gone down that road yet?
I have. I've also thought about this a lot. It's easy to think a lot in this subject.
Sure.
I think the book is called Day After Roswell
Philip
by
Corso.
Phil Corso. That's one of the first UAP books I read after the Bob Lazar interview. I think it was the first one. And he was mentioning night vision technology and a few other advances that were suspiciously jumping ahead of other ideas. I do believe that. So I'm completely convinced. I regard it as cold hard fact that craft have crashed on Earth and were recovered by the United States. Some were intact, some were just debris. And you could harvest things from that. What those things are, I don't know. Okay. Some people think, and they take a much more aggressive stance on this advancement, like our understanding of these craft and our ability to back engineer them, that they think a lot of these craft are back engineered, manufactured by humans after examining the technology of recovered craft. I don't believe that. I don't believe it for a couple reasons. Okay. It's clear that some of the craft are flown via the pilot's consciousness. The craft actually has a consciousness to it. Okay. A human, I highly doubt that a human will be able to figure that out. Okay. So that's a pretty good reason right there. Okay. The
Okay.
other reason is, all right, let's say a bunch of black triangles are back engineered. And so let me get this straight. Instead of using this in war, you're just going to visit random backyards. It makes
Mm,
no sense at all. So when they developed the B-2 stealth bomber, they got
mm.
it into combat the minute it was done, and they weren't flying around people's backyards and through the mountains. It's a tool for war. It's a tool to be used, okay? So they're just not gonna fly around random places, okay? And then I was talking about this with Clint Weldon of Night Shift podcast, where there is some evidence that the black triangles could be reverse engineered vehicles. If it's any of them, it could be that. Okay, that's what people
The
say.
TR3B.
Correct. Correct. But there are some characteristics that I don't think we could replicate. Okay, so a black triangle UAP hovers dead silent. We don't have anything that can do that. But the much more interesting part, especially of it from a therapist standpoint, is in the Immaculate Constellation document, which we know is real. It specifically says that with the triangle craft, when you see it, you feel you have a shared awareness with the craft. And then it's very good chance you're going to have long-term psychological suffering that includes insomnia, anxiety, and the feeling of being watched. Okay. So I'll ask a rhetorical question. Last time you went to an air show and saw a stealth bomber, did you then not sleep for a month? No. Okay. And that brings us to the first point. Again, it's like a circle. There's a consciousness component to these craft. That's my very long answer for saying I don't think we have back engineered a UAP.
And just to add a little bit more to that, I'm sure you're fully aware of the 2004 Tic Tac account with Commander David
Mhm.
Fravor, and the other pilot, I believe, was Dietrich. And those guys swear that whatever they saw is completely unconventional and they've never seen anything like it. And these are the top of the food chain pilots. Same thing with Ryan Graves. He was seeing cubes with inscribed spheres inside of them. And these are trained observers looking at something so anomalous and so different that you have to wonder, like, if there was something else out there that we were making, first of all, wouldn't these guys be aware of it? And second of all, what, who's interfering with their training exercises? Why
Mm.
would you do that? Are you the only reason I could come up with is if you're trying to put out a narrative that either A, we've got something the rest of the world doesn't have, and you don't want to tell them, so you indirectly tell them with this crazy event, or this is non-human tech. It's to me, it's one or the other. Like they saw what they saw. There was something under the water in the 2004 Tic Tac event, and it's an unconventional thing that's flying. So yeah, this is either something that we had and you're messing around during a training exercise, or it's non-human. It's one or the other.
And people who think the Tic Tac just so one theory is the Tic Tac is ours, and we just wanted to provide it like the realest, most authentic, real world training mission. But Fravor, Mellon, everybody who knows about that stuff said you would never test something that way. And nothing has ever been tested that way. So when they made like the B-2 stealth bomber, they didn't just show up unannounced, like in a training area and just start flying around. That's how people get killed. Yeah.
Yeah. Why would you deploy this high-tech
No.
thing in the middle of an exercise?
Yeah.
And it was clearly under intelligent control, according to the reports by Fravor, because it had, before he had gotten to his cat point, the return point, the thing was already there. So somehow it knew to do that. Yeah, these accounts, they frustrate me when people say that, oh, it was Lockheed. I'm like, how do you know that? This is a Lockheed Martin thing. I know it's this. You can tell by this thing. Like, how do you know that? These pilots that are high up the food chain don't know that.
Correct. And if I could add one other thing, Fravor did say that when the Tic Tac was hovering over something under the water, it looked like they were trying to communicate with each other. He specifically said that when he looked at the Tic Tac, it knew he did. There's
Right.
part of his story where he says it noticed that we noticed it. And that's like supernatural. We don't have an F-16 can't tell, or the pilot can't tell if Fravor's looking at him. They're just things that don't add up, in my opinion, that make it modern human tech. It's just a little bit too complex.
Yeah, I agree. There obviously there's way more to that story that the rest of us don't know. But yeah, I find it difficult to believe that it's human tech and that we've got this and they're messing around with it during a training exercise. I think if you've got this, you just keep it quiet and you're just don't interfere. We know where you're doing training exercises. We're doing something else. There's really no need for that. Erik, we've got a few more minutes here. I wanted to go full circle, and you've had your experience with the orb while you were camping. Chris Bledsoe had a very dramatic experience that he writes about in his book, UFO of God. You're of the opinion you think it's the same thing. He received a message, you received a message. Where do you see all of these sightings, all of this narrative sort of going over the next 10 years? Do you just see the sightings increasing? Do you see a full disclosure? Where are we here in 2035? Are we in the same spot?
I wish I knew. I think what changed a lot that I don't hear people talk about that often, I think it's FLIR. I think it's forward-looking infrared. Deserves a lot of credit for where we are today. Correct me if I'm wrong, I have not encountered a UAP story where the craft could evade FLIR. I have not come across a story because you cannot hide temperature. Even if you're invisible, it's still putting off heat or something like that. And why I mention that, are there more sightings Or do we just have advanced technology? Are there more sightings, or are people more aware and they look up often? So it's hard to decipher why we're seeing more. I think the main reason is technology. I do. Where this is going to end up, I'm not sure. There is a lot of talk of disclosure. Okay. So we could take the best case scenario put out by people like Carl Nell. Okay. So he says, yep, these things are here. That's obvious. And we slowly have to let people know. I hate to sound pessimistic. I don't anticipate a controlled disclosure. I don't think it's possible. I think this is so big that you really can't break the news to people gently. And I think there are going to be two reactions. You're going to have a lot of people freak out, and you're going to have a lot of people who are like today. They just don't, it doesn't really register. Like they've never had an experience. They're not familiar with this. I don't know. This Washington Post article said it's US tech. I don't know what to believe. I don't think there are going to be many people in the middle. I like the plan of disclosure, fully support anyone who wants that. I think it's ambitious to use the word controlled and disclosure in the same sentence.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's the same way. I just think this is just going to continue. The stories are just going to be continue to be pushed. The content creation will get better. But as far as an overt announcement from a head of state, I just don't see that happening. I just think it's going to just continue until so many people are just aware of it. That's just disclosure. Maybe that's a 50 years from now. Maybe that's 80 years from now, where it's just like the general public has just seen so many movies, seen so many podcasts, seen so many interviews where they're just like, all right, we get it. We get it. We're not alone. You're not going to tell us what it is. Maybe. And then as technology starts to roll out, maybe in 50 years, we get anti-gravity, whatever, better stuff. And the world just keeps on spinning like it always has. So, Erik, this is another fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you joining me. Tell everybody about your websites, about your book coming out. Where can people find you?
Yes, for a guy who spends all his time in the mountains by himself, it's actually easy to find me. So the new research project is just UFO1977.com, and you can read about all the madness that took place in that state in 1977. And then I don't call it a practice because I really don't practice as a therapist. My consultancy website is outcomecounseling.com. Even if you don't want to talk to me, there's also some really good information there if you want to educate yourself more on this matter. But I really appreciate you having me on. It was a great conversation, and I hope to see you again.
Yeah, let's definitely do this again. When the book comes out, we got to do it again because I'm going to get the book and read it up. And for anybody that's been watching, I like to dig in deep into things. And when I get hooked on something, that's it. I go all in. Erik, this was fantastic, man. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.